Hey hee yo, hey hee yay. Hey hee yo, hey hee yo. Ipai kalibasam togas ganao. Gun la asexwe halibasam togas ganao. Hey hee yo, hey hee yay. Hey hee yo, hey hee yo. He's walking now, sa secta at. Guess whisker now, halibasam talkie Sydney. Hey hee yo, hey hee yay. Hey hee yo, hey hee yo.
Listeners, you are tuned into CFRO, Vancouver's Co-op Radio, also streaming at www.coopradio.org. And over the next couple of hours, we are going to entertain you with some public affairs, things that are going about town and things that are happening across in the Middle East. Today on the program, we will be speaking with Margaret Grenier, who is Executive and Artistic Director for a really interesting dance company that we will be talking about that is going to be performing at the Historic Cultch Theater on October 9th through the 12th. And it's a really interesting performance, and we will talk about what is happening there. And we will then also be speaking with people from CJPME, that's Canadians for Justice in Palestine, Middle East, for Peace in the Middle East, rather. I can say things wrong because we're just live. It's okay. We're on co-op. We'll be speaking with them about a report that they recently filed called Intended to Fail, Systemic Anti-Palestinian Racism and Canada's Gaza Temporary Resident Visa Program. We will also be speaking with Savannah Craig on a report that she had about a Palestinian Canadian, Samar Akhduar, who was arrested for shouting at a Canadian immigration minister at a protest. We will also be joined, it's a pretty packed evening, with Rabbi David Merviser and Aaron Erlbel Palm and Jocelyn Grewal, who are working to provide direct personal support to families in Gaza who are facing the Israeli genocide. And we'll give you information if you are interested in getting involved and showing support. And finally, we will be joined with Nasser Najjar, a local Palestinian from Gaza, on some perspective of his and analysis around what is happening. So stay tuned, and in fact, just stay online, because I think we have Margaret here joining us. Hello, Margaret.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, no, it's really our pleasure. Thank you so much for taking this time to join us. Margaret, you know, it's really interesting that it's hard for me, for myself at least, it's hard for me to pronounce the name of the company, and so I left it out, and I'd really like you to just do us the honors and tell us a little bit about the dance company, its roots, and where sort of it sits in the scope of what we can even, if we can even call it Indigenous dance. Let's maybe start there. Where can you share with us?
Absolutely. I'm the Executive and Artistic Director with the Dancers of Damelahamid. And the Dancers of Damelahamid has a longer history. It's a company that emerged going all the way back to the 1960s, and it was after the potlatch ban, the federal law that made it illegal for song and dance here on the West Coast. When that law was lifted in the 1950s, there was a time of revitalization in the practice. And in our family, that work began to be shared in the form of public performance. It was under the guidance of my grandmother, Irene Harris, and my mother, Margaret Harris, was trained by my grandmother, and her and my father, Ken Harris, started the Dancers of Damelahamid. And at that time, it really was sharing ancestral dance that was passed down through the family's dance lineage.
Margaret, can you share with us a little bit of your own family history, where you guys are situated, and how you see what I'm getting at is how you see the resurgence of Indigenous dance on at least in these territories.
Well, I currently live in the Vancouver area, but my family is from northern BC. On my father's side, our home territory of the Gixan is along what's today called the Skeena River, and the mouth of the Skeena River goes down to the ocean where Prince Rupert now is, but our territory is just a few hours inland. And that's traditionally where the site of Damelahamid that our company is named over is located, or traditionally located. On my mother's side, our family is Cree, so my mother grew up in northern Manitoba, and when she married into the family, she was adopted into the family and trained within the family's dance traditions, and she became a very huge part in the revitalization of this practice. So that for my generation, I really was of the first generation to grow up with song and dance, once again going back to a very young age. And once my parents got older and they weren't really as able to carry the practice forward, that's when I began to take on more of a leadership role. And for myself, I also felt that I had to contribute, to the practice in my own way. It wasn't about repeating the work that had already been done over the last several decades, but to bring my own voice to it. And that's when our company began to take a contemporary approach, but still working within our traditional dance form.
Can you share some of the values that you have in terms of your sense of creating dance and the traditions that you are under? You talked about elders and especially matriarchs.
Yes, I have been taught that the reason why we have dance is that we, through dance and through the practice, we learn how to carry ourselves in this life and to care for others, to care for our resources and, this beautiful environment that we have here on the West Coast. So everything that we do within our practice not only carries ancestral knowledge, but it also connects us to land, it connects us to language. It really is a very fundamental practice to shaping our identity, and a practice that really, I feel, strengthens us as well as family and as communities.
Hello, hi Margaret. So I have a quick question here, which is from a viewer's standpoint for this dance and for what I'm witnessing, what are the emotions that I go through when I witness this performance, especially the Raven Mother one? And what would you say are some things that viewers should really be looking forward to and the expectations they should have when they come for the viewing?
Well, Raven Mother, the production that we're going to be sharing at the Cultch next week, is it's a very personal piece in many ways. It is a piece that our family has created since my mother passed in 2020, and it speaks to the importance that women have carried in the the dance practice, in the resiliency of the dance practice, but also as well the visionaries and the individuals whose dedication to the practice has ensured that we have this with us today. But it also speaks to the struggles, like even though all that the previous generation did to ensure that we have song and dance today, it didn't just create, a place for my generation to grow up in our culture that was just, no longer had its challenges. So we come to those struggles as women, and the piece reflects not only the strength and the beauty that is held within the culture, but also those places that we have to go to as women in order to be able to hold everything that we do as mothers for our daughters and for the next generation. So it's a piece that I think people will connect with because it reflects a family, it reflects a community and a practice that's so deeply grounded and rooted in land and history. But also I think that people will resonate with the struggle as well, and ultimately the hope that we carry.
That makes complete sense. And I especially love how you talk about it. There seems to be an act almost where you're balancing that community, the histories and the stories of the collective of women with the personal loss that you just mentioned. So what has that balance been like for you? And to further build on that, I also, while we were doing our research, we came across the use of masks. So how does all of this tie in to the performance?
Well, the dance practice is a practice that is traditionally uses masks. We're mask dancers, and the masks represent what we call as beings greater than ourselves. Within this piece, Raven Mother, clearly the raven crest is something that's very pivotal to what we've created, and it's represented in a number of ways. It's represented as a beautiful raven mask, and the mask itself transforms. It has several different masks within that are also danced. We've also used the raven to create a carved sculpture that descends from above that carries some of the masks within it. We've also created a raven canoe within the piece that the dancers can interact with to really bring the story to life. And also because this is such a work of, even though it's a work that's sharing a contemporary story, it also is a work that still continues that effort of revitalization of a culture, and within it we've created a beautiful feather cloak, and this feather cloak is something that hasn't been danced for many generations. It's only something that we learned how to make through researching the piece.
Wow, that sounds fantastic and fascinating, and I'm sure everyone listening is going to be super excited to attend this show. So just to wind down and ask you a last question, which is what emotions do you feel that you were hoping to evoke in the viewers as they experience this, and what is the message that as a single theme you want everyone to take away when they have this?
I think that the message that has really resonated with me in this work is it reflects the strength that we hold as women, but I think it's more accurately described as really when we step into ourselves, when we can represent ourselves fully and truly. It's something that is so important for Indigenous peoples when so many of our communities have experienced so much loss of language, so much loss of culture, so much loss of connection to family, connection. We've been distanced from our home territories and distanced from all these practices. And I think that there's something that is not only for the dancers when you have the ability to represent yourself in the way that we can through this practice. I think that is something that also can resonate with our audiences, and to see the beauty and the strength and the longevity of our cultures, of our Indigenous cultures. I think that will help us to bridge a lot of the gaps that we have had in understanding these cultures, and I think really create a very beautiful future for the generations that are going to come.
Perfect. That sounds incredible. And once again, I want to thank you for your time, for taking the time to talk to us, telling us about the show. And for everyone, once again, the show premieres October 9th. It runs from 9 to 12. It's at the Cultch Theater. Are there any other details that you'd like to add?
I would just encourage anyone who would like to come and see the piece to get their tickets. I know that there's still tickets remaining, but there's only a few on some of the nights.
Yes, they're selling fast, so please get those tickets immediately, folks. Thank you so much for your time, Margaret. I really appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure talking to you and having you share these stories with everyone listening.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, that was Margaret Grenier, and I'll spell it for you in case you wanted to look it up on the internet. It's the name of the company. It's Dancers of Damelahamid, which is spelled Damelahamid. The program that we were speaking about is titled Raven Mother, and you can even find information on the Cultch website if you like. So, other announcements. We are broadcasting from Coast Salish territories. This is CFRO, Vancouver's Co-op Radio, 100.5 FM, and streaming at www.coopradio.org. It is also Orange Shirt Day. Orange, well, people wear orange today because we're commemorating a long weekend, a new long weekend. If you don't know about it, you should get some info and figure out what's going on in where we are at. So we're almost at the time where we're going to switch over and start speaking with those folks from CJPME, which is Canadian for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, who have a report intended to fail the systemic and anti-Palestinian racism in Canada's Gaza temporary resident visa program. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have to take a quick musical break. We're going to get back to listening to the Asian Dub Foundation and then set up for our next segment. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Okay, listeners, and yes, we're still back here on CFRO. I have on the line Isra Al-Safin and Omar, and we wanted to discuss with them this issue that we have, this ongoing issue of families from Palestine not coming into Canada, having difficulties coming into Canada, and promises from the government. And there was a report filed by CJPME titled "Intended to Fail: Systemic Anti-Palestinian Racism in Canada's Gaza Temporary Resident Visa Program." So thank you very much, Isra and Omar, for taking this time to join us. May I ask perhaps Omar or Isra, either of you, to start by just sharing a little bit about yourselves, your context, and how you intersect with this report and this issue.
Isra, you go first.
So, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Isra Al-Safin. I'm a Palestinian Canadian, and I have been advocating on this issue for the past year. We're advocating with the Gazans Canadians League team.
Great, thank you. And Omar?
Yeah, so my name is Omar. I've been working with Isra and other members almost a year, and I'm based in Vancouver.
Omar, you're based in Vancouver, so you're here locally. Thank you once again. And Isra, can you share a little bit of context around what the major issues are that you think individuals or the Palestinians in general wanting to come into Canada are facing? Is there resistance, or is there something else going on? What's your perspective? Would you mind sharing?
So, unfortunately, if you look at the program as a program, you see what do you want? There's a program for your families. What's the issues? Which is leading to your question. But when you go deep into the program itself, you will see the program has been designed in a way that it's way complicated, and it's an obstacle for our families to come, even though from the outside it looks like it's here for helping the families.
Right. It looks like the government is here and trying to do something, and they're always having some excuse or the other, it seems to me, when I'm listening to the media reports or even listening to them speaking. So it's interesting to hear your perspective. This is obviously the feeling that we have in the community, that the government is not quite serious or is not quite stepping up.
Yes. So when the special measures announcement came out, we all were like having that hope of yes, we have a little bit of hope, we can save our families. But when we faced the requirements that was put when the program was online, alive, on January 9th, it was a slap in the face. The first step of applying, which was never before the code stage, the unique code stage, was not before in any program. So that was, for us, it's like, what we're going to do? Okay, apply for the codes, expecting that the codes will come out very smoothly. That didn't happen. Applying for the code itself required us to fill up a statutory declaration form and in a certain form, certain PDF from the IRCC website, and then take it to a notary and sign it. And imagine yourself knowing that there is a cap when the program is coming out, and this is 1,000 people only. You are running to find a notary to notarize your papers and apply. It was a most stressful moment for each one of us in the community.
Omar, how has it been for you in your experience with this? What kinds of obstacles have you faced or others have faced as you are navigating this?
Well, after a year since the day we almost started advocating for this, I do have a huge belief that as this government is weaponizing Israel to kill more civilians and Palestinians violently by all these weapons, this program came to kill us emotionally and just not only drain us, but cause us not only emotional drain, and it caused us burnout. This program came to us as a Palestinian and Arab community to finish us emotionally, instead of just sending with them to kill us. We've been struggling. Israel has been describing a fraction of what we have been going through from day one. Imagine yourself advocating for a program, talking to all these politicians from all different parties. They don't even see you. They don't even hear you. They sit down with you and they give you the impression that they don't exist, with all the dehumanizing language they use in their social media or with you. And then even if they say positive things to you on your face, on the back screen or in public, they never say anything good about Palestine. And then you get this kind of policy announced by the minister, but then they keep continuing to put sticks in the wheels the whole time. So they basically gave us I felt like I'm a dog chasing a bone. They give us the bone, an incomplete bone, and they keep you in the loop of you keep asking for better modifications for the program. You're not only watching your loved ones being slaughtered on TV in a genocide, but you have to continue fighting and meeting their teams on weekly basis, on monthly basis, and you keep to follow up, and then you follow up, and then you follow up, until you are drained. Many of us lost their jobs, broke up with their partners, whole family collapsed here. But at the same time, until now, the Canadian government did not bring anyone. It was a whole PR show, which is something that brings exactly what the Canadian government is really great at, is PR to the world, that we are a diversity, we are a country that is for equality and equity, that we are fine. Although in different cases, they pushed a button, they issued 1 million visa. They pushed a button in less than 14 days and they issued 1 million visa. For us, until now, 600-something visas were issued for people after a full year of advocating with every single politician. So you can imagine the amount of humiliation we feel as people who hold the Canadian citizenship but doesn't even feel the feeling of belonging anymore because of this government action. This can give you a glimpse of what's happening in our case.
Wow, that's quite the story, right? And you're fully correct in saying that there is this belonging equation that really gets affected. So, to address that belonging thing, what are some of these things from a policy standpoint that your report really found that, oh, it fails for these particular reasons? Because the way it's titled, intended to fail, we've clearly been able to point out these, issues like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what are like the top 3 reasons that the report was able to point out as to why this has failed? And what are some things that can be done better to get it to fail less, I suppose? Because success is a whole different word. Let's go to failing less before succeeding.
I mean, listen, you cannot convince any regular person who doesn't even understand politics that this government cannot evacuate people talking to their biggest ally in the whole, one of the biggest allies in the world, Israel. They are refusing to talk to them. They are refusing to evacuate people. Meanwhile, maybe 10% to 30% of people who should be in Canada, they got killed while waiting for their visas. We have hundreds, if not tens, hundreds of people who were killed while waiting for this visa. And that's just to tell you that, okay, they issued the program, and now it's like, oh yeah, we're sorry, we failed, and then they keep showing us compassion, which is something that we are used to from this Liberal government. You talk to any politician, and then they try to show you compassion, but they give you nothing. It's just the way how this government in Canada function. I think the other part Israel can answer.
So I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the second part. If you could repeat it, please.
Yeah, so basically what I was asking is what can be done better to maybe fail less as a system, and how do we go towards improving?
Well, maybe instead of just talking about the Canadian values and how we want our community to be, is actually do actions to prove it. I always tell people I was too naive to admit that my decision to leave everything behind and come to Canada to be part of this community, to find a future for myself and my kids, that was the right decision. And after this year, I felt like I've been wrong because I was not Canadian enough. I was a second-degree Canadian. My family was not important. No matter what I bleed, I am in pain. I'm mourning my brother that was killed. I want to save my family. That was not a rush for anybody. The program was a failure, and even though we have 600 visas, these people already paid their way out to Cairo. So anybody else that can't pay that amount of money, they're still stuck, or they already paid, but it was too late for them to be on the list of evacuation. Why we have to go through steps and stages, and like it wasn't taking into consideration and serious discussions with allies, as Omar mentioned. And we saw a lot of countries got people out, like USA, like UAE, like Turkey, like Australia. So these people did have a say, did have a chance to evacuate people. On the other hand, Canada failed even to evacuate Canadians themselves from Gaza to that point. And when you look at the process itself, how it was complicated, the amount of information they required us to provide. Like, I'm here in Canada, I barely have a chance to call my family or text them to make sure that they're alive, and they want me to provide my father's work experience since he was 16. And he's a retired man right now. And him himself can't remember what's the name of his supervisor when he was 16. Like, seriously? Wow. These kind of information I would collect from them. For example, the other part of the information they want, the in-laws of my brother. If my sister-in-law, I saw her once in my life, how am I going to know her father's date of birth, the place of birth, full name in English as a passport, and stuff like that? It was insane. It was insane, and it wasn't put in a way that to help us evacuating our families. In the other hand, we saw much easier process for other programs like the Ukrainian program. And I'm not against getting people out of war. Obviously, we want to save our loved ones. But when you see that there's 700,000 visas been issued in the Ukrainian program versus 600 for our program with a cap and a lot of complication, and yet not a lot of features and settlement services being given to the families that arrive, like the Ukrainian, and there is no PR pathway been put in place like the Ukrainian program. This is a big question mark. This is a big question mark to anybody.
For listeners who are interested in reading the report, it's really easy. It's on the CJPME.org website, and if you just search the keywords Gaza visa program, you'll get a lot of information. I had a follow-up for either of you, just on the theme of how Canada presents itself as a nation. We have a lot of organizations who are dedicated to anti-racism, to, all these issues that we have around systemic racism, a lot of which your reports are underlining. What has been, or has there been any kinds of responses from, we can call them civil society organizations, in the issue?
I want to tell you something out of my experience. I know there is a lot of work has been done through the government and other organizations for Islamophobia, for immigrants and newcomers, and etc. But as a Palestinian, the second I'm saying I'm from Palestine, faces will change. And the second I'm opening my mouth, I'm anti-Semitic. So it was always a taboo not to talk about it. You're scared to express your feelings. You're scared to express your rights. And it's always shut it down. So as a Palestinian, specifically, nothing been done. Nothing been done. Nothing been mentioned in the history books. Nothing been mentioned in the education system about Palestine, about the struggle of Palestinian people. So how you expect that there is actually steps been done?
Omar, do you have any... Hello, Omar. Are we still here together with you?
Yeah, I'm still here. I think what is the general norm on how Canadian government through history has been dealing with us. I think the only way that they see us is they see us either a terrorist or a suspicion of a terrorist because of our heritage, identity, and maybe our colors. There is no other justification or explanation of what's been happening. I think we're dealing with a government that just sees us not as people under military occupation, and this is translated in the government votes in the U.S., like the last one in the UN, not saying anything about the settlement or even recognizing the Israeli settlements in the West Bank as an illegal settlement. I think the problem here, and we are talking on this day, the day of reconciliation and Indigenous. The problem is this government cannot even identify us in any possible way for any even to move forward in a reconciliation for us as Palestinians, even to claim a state or whatsoever. And it's embedded in this country's DNA. I think the problem is very rooted in this government and even any other government in Canadian institutions itself. Mm-hmm. Which means that us as the last country in the whole world that is under military occupation and settler colonialism, we are the last country. Palestinians are the last people in the whole world who are still facing continuous settler colonialism, which is the same thing that's been happening in Canada. Mm-hmm. They don't see any other justification for us or existence as a human being, as people. They see us as only as a suspicion on the lens and the eye of being terrorists. And that's why it's translated to the whole forever long time of security clearance. I have my sister who's a teacher stuck in Egypt since April. Until now, she's waiting for her visa. Meanwhile, an Israeli army, someone who served in the Israeli army who has been proven by all these human rights organizations that it violates the human rights, the whole story, can get a visa tomorrow and come to Canada, and his security or her security clearance would take a week or 2 weeks or even 48 hours. And this is the root problem. This is the root cause here. Just because you're a Palestinian and still under settler colonialism, you are looked in the eye of being suspicious or a terrorist, and that's translated in the program. Imagine, I talk to my mom once every, when she gets the time to go to a specific spot in the northern part of the Gaza Strip to get some signal by an Israeli settlement. Mm-hmm. And they are asking me to search for every brother-in-law relative to put in the application to get the date of birth, where they have worked, where they were born, and their full name and their identity number and their passport number. It's completely insane. I can barely speak to my mom, who I love, right? I can barely catch my brother on his WhatsApp to go and search for all these pieces of information. It just tells you one specific thing. This government doesn't even see Canadians who are Palestinians, who passed all this security clearance for months before they come to Canada, as only as terrorists. We're not humans for them. We're subhumans. And that's their own citizen. That's the country that says we have Canadian values and we celebrate our Independence Day based on those values. I, as a Canadian, doesn't see that they even exist. I think it's a lie. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we concur, Omar. Absolutely. It is as transparent as light. When we see especially this kind of juxtaposition that we have, and we know that it's very simple for governments to be able to move their citizens and the relatives of them if they needed to. And you hit it on the nail before when you said that Canada is an ally of this country, and why would they even extend it out? So it's a real paradox, and our feelings are so much with you that how you people are being able to survive over and over and over again and yet have this resilience and strength. It's really a model for everybody else, but the cost is absolutely horrific. We've taken up a lot of your time and efforts and emotion and energy in this conversation. I want to thank you again, and also ask you if there is anything else that you might want to add or leave us with.
For me, I just want to add a thank you for every single Canadian who has been marching in the streets asking for a ceasefire, for every single Canadian in every single community who has been in support with us from day one. I have seen nothing but wonderful feelings and warmth from every Canadian citizen here who has been around. What I'm talking about is always the DNA of the government and the governmental institutions institutions of this country, who I am willing and trying to fix with my fellows here.
Isra, do you have any last words for us?
A lot of emotions been in this call, but just want to comment when you said that the resilience and the strength in us. We're not strong. We're tired.
Yeah.
We're tired to the max. But when you put in on the decision of you survive and you save your loved ones, and it's all in your shoulders, or you're done, you have to do it. And that's why we keep moving. We keep doing what we're doing. And maybe there is a little bit of hope because of the people that they showed us support in the community, because of the people that stand up beside us, and they stand up for the rights and for the human rights. We are still having that little hope of one day we will be recognizing Palestinians and Palestinian state. One day we will be standing up in recognition of the Palestinian people's rights. And one day we will be able to see the work and the hard work that we've been doing for years and years been paid off.
Yeah, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Well, on that note, I do want to say thank you both so much. We're going to move this to a sound music break kind of thing, and we're going to continue our programming. Thank you both once again. Really appreciate it. And stay tuned in, folks, as we come back.
Okay, so again, and we continue. I think this is working. Here we are, moving along the program, and now this time we have on the line Savannah Craig, who is a freelance journalist, a videographer, and really talented person who has written an article that I'll bring up the title for. It's about a Palestinian mom who was charged for protesting Canada's immigration system. The name of the lady is Samar Al-Kadur, and that person was arrested for shouting at Canada's immigration minister at a protest after the government failed to grant their daughter a visa before she died in Gaza this year. Savannah had written quite a long piece that's available on a couple of places on the internet and is joining us here live. Hi, Savannah. Are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you. It's really our pleasure. Thank you for taking the time out, and actually, thank you for writing the piece. Savannah, in this conversation, I hope to let listeners know a little bit more about your work and the body of your work and the other things that you do. But let's start with this particular piece. I don't have it in front of me, but the title of the piece is, can you name it so that if listeners want to Google it and look for it, they can?
Absolutely. It's called Grieving Palestinian Mom Charged for Protesting Canada's Immigration System, and this was published by TRT World, which is a Turkish broadcaster.
Okay, and so start with the intersection between you and this particular story. Maybe you can give us a little bit of context around your reporting and how you got to this particular story.
Yes, absolutely. So I've been covering social movements, the environment, and policing for about 8 years now. And included within social movements, I've also been covering pro-Palestine activism here in Montreal for the last 8 years. And, you know, after the events of October 7th, a lot of pro-Palestine activism started. I mean, it was always persistent in Montreal, but it really took off. And since early October, you know, almost a year ago now, we've seen in Montreal at minimum 2 protests a week. So it's been quite active in the streets of Montreal. And, you know, just given the fact that I know the community in Montreal, and this is something I've been reporting on for a long time, I thought that it was really important for me to document what was going on, especially at the time in Canada. A lot of politicians, media outlets were framing these protests as being, pro-terrorist protests. So I thought it was really important for me to just go there and show people what was actually happening at these protests. Just because a lot of this rhetoric was being promoted by politicians and people who weren't actually attending these protests themselves. So in terms of Samar Alekdo, I first met Samar in late March. She began hosting what she calls a sit-in outside of Canada's Immigration Minister Mark Miller's office, which is located in the southwest here in Montreal. So Samar's intention with this sit-in is essentially, she believed at the time and still believes that Canada is not doing enough to bring Gazans here more urgently through the temporary residency visa program, which is very true. Canada has been failing Gazans through this program. Even Immigration Minister Mark Miller himself said that this program is a failure in March. And Samar herself, this issue is much more personal for her because her own daughter, Jana, died in Gaza on January 8th due to malnutrition. And Samar and her husband have been trying to bring Jana to Canada since they arrived in about 2019, I believe, and Jana was approved to come to Canada 2 weeks after her death. So I do want to make it clear that this was not through the temporary residency visa program, which is being offered to Gazans with family members in Canada via the IRCC. This program that she tried to apply and bring Jenna through was available before the TRV program, and it was offered through Global Affairs Canada. So essentially, Samar, she began this sit-in because she had this personal experience and she didn't want it to happen to anyone else. And she still does have loved ones in Gaza who are trying to leave through this program. And, she essentially said in an interview that I had with her on the first day I met her in late March that, she's not just doing this for her own family. She's doing this for all Palestinians in Gaza who are trying to leave through this program.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Samar. And what we're really trying to also highlight over here for everyone listening is the entire act of being arrested occurs after a protest, which sort of goes in the direction of freedom of speech, activism. So how does all of this really come together, and why does this lead to an arrest? Because, by all logical thinking, you can say anything you want, freedom of speech, but you can't because XYZ. So what is the XYZ here?
Well, in terms of why does this lead to an arrest, I think that it would be the police who could answer to that. It couldn't be me, but as a journalist who has been, covering actions for years and years, and even specifically the pro-Palestinian movement, I have never seen personally, this level of arrest. Since October, it's just immense, at least from what I've seen in Montreal. But I know that this is also a growing issue among pro-Palestine protests, both in Canada and the U.S., as well as the UK and beyond, even Australia, other parts in Europe. So it really is this kind of hard question that I think, the legal system is starting to tackle, because within Canada's charter, it essentially protects freedom of speech. And now we're in these kind of murky waters where, people are out on the streets and they're demanding for Canada to end ties with Israel, to uphold an arms embargo, and as a result, these people are being arrested. And it is, I think it is a very defining moment in Canadian history where, we're going to see what happens with these people's people who are being arrested. Samar's case, from the other cases of arrests that I've heard of and that I've seen, they're still held up in the court system. Montreal notoriously has a very slow court system, but in terms of Samar's case, it's moving quite quick. So I attended her first and so far only hearing. It was about a day after her arrest, so this was early September, and she has another hearing mid-November. I believe it's November 12th. So this is moving quite fast, but Samar was essentially on a Friday. She received a call which she didn't answer. It was an anonymous number, and then she received a text message from a police officer saying there's a warrant for her arrest, on charges of mischief and charges of harassment. And essentially, what had happened is that, as I said earlier, Samar has been hosting these sit-ins outside of Mark Miller's office, Immigration Minister Mark Miller's office, but she's also kind of turned it into this greater movement, what she calls a mobile sit-in, where she goes to different the offices of different politicians or companies that do have ties to Israel or essentially have not denounced Canada's involvement or Israel's role in what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank and now in Lebanon. And she was outside of a Liberal MP in an area of Montreal called Verdun. The Liberal MP, her name is Laura Palestini, and Samar, as well as other activists, were protesting outside of this MP's office. And as Samar was leaving, she saw Mark Miller on the street going towards a car, and she essentially, went towards him, started filming, started yelling at him and chanting. And it wasn't Miller who made the complaint to the police. It was two of Miller's assistants who were there. And when I interviewed Samar's lawyer, Barbara Badon, she essentially said, it is worrisome that we are having, while it isn't the minister himself, we are having, employees in Canada's federal government essentially making a complaint which has led to an arrest of an activist. And Miller himself, for months, has not publicly commented on these sit-ins. Samar has requested multiple meetings with him because, she just wants him to hear her out, and she wants to know what more is he doing to bring Gazans to Canada. And she hasn't even received a response. Even numerous times I've reached out to Miller's office to just receive a comment on the reports that I'm putting together about these sit-ins, and no response from his office either. So I guess to kind of tie it together, while I can't comment on, why police are doing this, it is a concerning trend, that we are seeing such mass arrests of these activists, and there's not an example that I can bring to light right now of what has happened to one of these cases in Montreal specifically, because as I said earlier, so many are tied up in the courts. But with Samar's case, it's moving forward quite quickly. So we'll see what happens. But it's definitely something I'm going to keep my eyes on because under our charter, these activists, they do have a right to protest. They do have a right to free speech, and I think now we're just at this moment where something that should be protected under Canadian Charter is now almost being called into question of whether it is being protected or not.
And I agree with you completely. It also is, historically a tactic to fearmonger and to create this situation where others who are maybe interested may not, and if you're threatened by arrest, others who may be wanting to take action, stop taking action. And with time being short, I suppose I do want to ask a final question, which is, like you mentioned, the public has such an important role to play in all of this. How has the public responded within Montreal? How has that been? And what comes next in these responses as a public? What can also the public do to almost tell the government to, hey, maybe consider the very laws that you wrote and apply them fairly?
Well, I think what I've seen with Samar's case in Montreal, which has been a very common reaction to many arrests in Montreal, is that people have taken to the streets. And when I arrived to her hearing, there was a protest outside. There were also activists filling not the courtroom, well, yes, the courtroom itself, but also the halls of the courtroom. There were so many people there that they couldn't even fit them in the courtroom. And it was actually such an issue of the amount of people that were there that I couldn't even get into the courtroom at first just because there were so many people. So eventually, some activists, they heard that journalists were outside and unable to get in. So they left to make space for journalists such as myself. I mean, it's hard to say what people can do. I'm not sure I can answer for that, just because I am a journalist and essentially I'm there to document. I'm not there to give advice. But I think the consistent response that I've been seeing from activists in person and online is that we have to keep showing that they have to keep showing up, and they want to keep talking about this online. And I think that the growing fear is that what will happen once we stop talking about this, once we stop putting pressure. And I even had a few people say to me, we think that, some activists say to me that they think that my article made waves. And I said, in what sense? And Samar was hosting a protest outside of Indigo's Indigo Chapters bookstore due to the CEO's establishment and funding of a program for Israeli soldiers, and the activist said to me, well, the police aren't up close near Samar as they usually are. They're actually down the street. And I mean, that's just their opinion. I thought that was an interesting take, but I mean, I guess it is really important to have journalists on the scene, because in Canada over the last few years, there have been arrests of journalists, and as you mentioned before, in terms of activists being arrested, it kind of can create this fear not to go to these events, not to participate in activism. So, I mean, as someone who is a journalist, I think that any issue within our society, we have to keep talking about it, especially one concerning, the possibility of no longer being able to have access to free speech in Canada.
Yeah. Savannah, can you let listeners know where they can get your work, where they can find some of your work? Is there a place or a couple places?
Absolutely, yes. I would be happy to share that. Thank you for asking. If you want to see any of my work, both written or video, you can follow me at Savannah Craig, SAVANNA CRAIG, both on Instagram and Twitter, and Savannah.Craig on TikTok.
Savannah, how many years have you been covering police and the Palestinian community and the issues around that specifically?
Yeah, for 8 years now. And
so it occurred to me that you've probably seen trends, or have you, in terms of policing and the Palestinian community. Are you able to highlight any of those, or do you feel that it's been a consistent thing but maybe just applied differently or ramped up, or is there some differences that you see?
In Montreal specifically, I have never seen a movement this heavily policed. And we do, in Montreal, I believe it's March 15th, there's a police brutality protest.
it's an annual march, essentially just activists calling attention to the intense police brutality that does happen in Montreal. It is an issue here. And yearly, this is the only protest that I've really seen arrests, police violence at such a high level. But now I would say that both police brutality and the arresting of activists is really, within the pro-Palestine movement. I would say I haven't seen any other movements in Montreal that have had the same rates, intense rates of policing, and it's definitely something new to me. But I mean, I guess we'll have to see how it evolves. But I think it's not just in Montreal. I mean, we're seeing, especially with the encampments, that no longer stand, but across Canada, across the United States. These activists, they're just facing, whether it's tactics from riot cops. Some of them are being harmed as well. I've met many activists who have been harmed within the pro-Palestine movement from police, but there's so many arrests. There's many arrests.
Being out here out west, I mean, for sure. I mean, we have crowds coming out, we have protests and so on, and policing is quite. The presence is quite there, but it's very different from Montreal. When we're out here in the West, we sometimes think of Montreal as a totally different country, in a way that the public has been coming out in such numbers throughout this thing. I think I don't want to be comparative, but it just seems to me that Montreal is like the people are just coming right out, and it's a weird sort of place to be in, Savannah. So, I mean, thank you so much for taking up this issue and writing about this particular case. I guess I wanted to leave you with one last question, if you may. Let us know what was maybe really kind of interesting for you as you were covering Samar's story. Having covered the issue for 8 years, I mean, you've probably seen so much. But in terms of this, what were one or the two really interesting things for you personally, or some things that you learned about as you went through this coverage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of my initial interests with Samar, and which is still an interest for me in covering her issue, is that she's had both experiences in Gaza and in Montreal, in terms of, with just way of life, but also, interacting with the Israeli military, interacting with the Montreal police. And I think something so interesting that she told me for the first time in early June, but she's repeated since, is that the police in Montreal, they remind her so much of the Israeli military. She said, in terms of the tactics used to instill fear amongst the public, as well as the brutality. I actually covered, it was on June 6th on McGill campus, where at the time there was a Gaza Solidarity encampment. Some of the activists had escalated their tactics to push McGill to meet their demands, and had occupied a room inside of the James administration building on McGill campus. And there was a support rally outside, and I was documenting that support rally. And Samar, she was sort of near the front lines, and she was actually pepper sprayed in the face. And I think the interesting thing about Samar is she's so resilient, and she won't stop. She's out on the streets almost every single day, and not only is she just out on the streets tirelessly promoting change and putting pressure on the government, she's also there at the same time while she's grappling with the grief of losing her daughter. And I can't imagine what a difficult thing that is to experience, and something that I know that parents who have lost children have said that they carry this throughout their whole life. And I think that for Samar, within this piece, I really didn't want to portray her as a victim. I wanted to portray her as a survivor, because she's experienced and continues to experience such immense grief, and she won't stop because she just doesn't want this suffering, this pain to continue for anyone. And at the same time of demanding this, her life is also, on this roller coaster. She's now experiencing a legal battle. She's been experiencing police brutality. She's been experiencing silencing tactics. And I just, I think that it's just such a story of resilience. And, I talk to Samar almost once a week just to check in on her and see if there's any developments with their case and, with the protests. And I'm always just so astonished by her. And I think that she just really has become this symbol within the pro-Palestine movement in Montreal of just such resilience. And I think that has been something that has been keeping me coming back to cover her story, and just because of the pure fact that I think that it's so important that people know of her experience and understand that what's happening to people in Gaza and the immense horrors that they're going through, it's also happening to people here. She may not be physically experiencing that pain of what Gazans are going through there, but she's experiencing the grief trying to get her family here, the grief of having lost her daughter. I think that so many Canadians can feel so distant from the issue, and, it's on the other side of the world. This doesn't really affect us. But, you could walk by Samara in the street and, you wouldn't even, now maybe it's different because her name is really out there, but, we're walking by people every day and we don't know their story, and many times so many of the people we walk by may have direct ties to what's going on, and really be feeling this grief and experience on a personal level.
Savannah, once again, thank you so much for taking this time out, for following this issue in the community and writing about it. We look forward to also talking with you in the future. I just learned a few statistics about you as I was doing some research, and I'd be really curious to follow up on that and let listeners know once more where they can track your work, please, for us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. You can follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Savannah Craig. It's SAVANNA CRAIG.
Yeah, I encourage listeners to look up this body of work and find out more. Savannah, thank you so much for taking this time out. We really look forward to rereading the article as well as talking with you as we go down the road.
Thank you so much for taking the time to invite me and speak with me. It's really wonderful.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye. Thanks.
So, folks, yeah, cling, cling. We're still here on what we call unceded Coast Salish territory. Do you know where you are? Mark yourselves. It is now coming up to 6:15. We're running a bit late. We've got such a packed program. But we will be expected to join in with Rabbi David Mirviser, Aaron Arbel Palm, Jasleen Grebel, who are all working on providing direct and personal support to families in Gaza who are facing the Israeli genocide. We're going to be online with them, and if you want to go ahead of us, you can check out www.gofundme.com/f/help-gaza-families-survive. And in the meantime, we're going to go back to Asian Dub Foundation. It might be a bit skippy. That's because we're waiting for the CBC to kick in and throw us a lot of cash. But in the meantime, you can come and join us at www.coopradio.org. Throw us some money, listen to some different programs, volunteer, and do all that kind of stuff. Okay? We'll be right back. Okay. We're back. And we should be now joined with all of our three guests here. Is that true? Are we here with three guests?
David's here.
I think so. Aaron's here.
definitely. Something here as well.
And Jocelyn? Awesome. All right.
How's the sound quality?
Who knows? We'll just see what happens, David. But it's always it always turns out the way it is. You know, it's always on, or gonna be on. Anyway, here we are, celebrating a little bit of coming together. At least trying to figure out how we can support each other and support those that are really, really far away. So just again, we're joined on the line with Rabbi David Mirviser, Aaron Arbel Palm, and Jocelyn Grewal, who are part of a collective, actually, of a group of folks that are working on providing direct personal support to families in Gaza who are facing the Israeli genocide. And, based on what's going on, it seems like maybe this is one way that people can directly do something if they want to. And we'll give more information. It's www.gofundme.com/F/help Gaza-families or -survive. So maybe we can start with David. David, let us know a little bit about how this has come together and sort of who are the folks that are involved.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having us on. Really appreciate it very much. And other people can get involved if they want. So this actually all started more than 5 years ago, where a man in Gaza just contacted me on Facebook because he probably saw me posting stuff about Palestine, and he thought it would be just interesting to reach out to me. And I developed a relationship with him, and then after like a few months, he wrote to me very reluctantly and very hesitantly and said he was having a hard time feeding his children. This was like more than 5 years ago, and I just thought, okay, I'll send you like $50, and I did, and he was like so grateful. And then about a month later, he was in the same situation again. So just briefly, that's how I got started, and I'm still in touch with him, and we're still helping him. However, since then, his home has been totally destroyed. He's been displaced. He's been living in a tent in Rafah, and then in another place, and then in another place, and then like more and more and more and more people still needed help. And since October 7th, I have basically told friends, and I would say that Jocelyn, who's with us here on the line, and Aaron are both friends who I've known for years, just told them what I'm doing, and they're like, oh my God, we'll do that too, So Jocelyn has been helping certain people in Gaza, and Aaron has been helping certain people in Gaza for months and months, and Aaron's amazing. She raised literally tens of thousands of dollars and helped the families that she was supporting to actually get out of Gaza, back in April. So they're in Cairo, but they have total need for support in Cairo because they're not allowed to work. And all this stuff, so I'm just telling you, I think you might have asked me, tell about the other people. So Aaron and Jocelyn are two of the other people that are doing this, and there's maybe another 30 or 40 of us organized into kind of clusters or groups or support circles, helping maybe 15 or 20 families in Gaza, and a few who've gotten out and are in Cairo.
So this does seem like a very community first, and like David, you mentioned, very organic growth to this movement, this collective. And you use the word help quite often. So maybe you could actually go into details of what is the meaning of this help that we provide. You mentioned that Ellen raises funds, Justine helps with families. How does the help really work?
Yeah, so I want to say really clearly it's two kinds of help. So one is raising funds. And a lot of people here have a misconception that, for example, there is no food. But that's not true. There is. But people have to buy it, and it's very expensive. And same thing with water, and same thing even with having any shelter, or even people fled their homes in October with their children a year ago. Well, children's feet grow. So the shoes that kids were wearing a year ago are no, like their feet don't even fit in them. So they need shoes, right? So we send them money so that they can get stuff that they need. That's one kind of help. The other kind of help is really like emotional support and what Dr. Gabor Mate calls empathic witnessing. Like, we're just there for them. We let, and every single day, we write to them, like, how are you doing? What's going on? What's happening with you? And many of these people so appreciate that. They say we are like their second family, and they can tell us what's going on. And we're like, we're like just there for them. And there are people among us who can't spare a single dollar, but they really give their hearts, they're there for them. So that's two different ways that we help them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'd love to hear from both Erin and Jocelyn as well, like what their experiences have been like since they've come on and where they feel like, oh, this is the thing that is happening right now. Everyone feels a particular way. And what are the stories that you're hearing the most? What are like the common themes that you come across those? And what are some things that you wish we all did more / better? Because like David said, money, not everyone has, but maybe there's something else.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. My name is Erin Aberley Palm. And thanks to David, I have been in touch with a Palestinian family that I've been seeing through this genocide since the end of December. And David put out actually a Facebook post that said, hey, we're looking for anyone who wants to be an emotional support. And I was like, absolutely. It's the least I can do at this moment, to give some level of comfort and grounding, if I possibly even could, to people who are experiencing some incredibly horrific living situations. And from that, I became such dear friends with Ala and Ola and her younger sister Hanan. And I think for me, it was really clear that our government wasn't necessarily going to do anything. Like the amount of refugees that were being allowed into Canada or were questioned to be allowed into Canada were maybe 1,000 at the time in January. And since then it's been 5,000. And really that was only dependent on whether your family was living in Gaza, that you could sponsor them to come over and live in Canada. But because I don't have direct family in Gaza, I thought, oh my goodness, well, what can I do to contribute? And, he was this beautiful post, and I became beautiful friends with Ola and Hanan, and Ala had a baby in the middle of the war, in the middle of the genocide happening, and Ola was pregnant through most of her time in Gaza, up until recently when she gave birth in Cairo after we managed to get them out in April. But really for me it was like, well, I'll just start with being emotionally there, and then after that it was just reaching out, using social media for the good of it, and really seeking people who wanted to contribute, because there are so many people I think who want to contribute but don't know how to start. And I'm not good at fundraising. Like I'm a performer and a singer and those things, but I've never really done much fundraising. I think there are so many beautiful networks of community care right now that are accessible, and I think all those networks have joined together to really do something positive. And yes, I ended up working with Massey Books. Incredible. Patricia from Massey Books was really one of the first people who said, hey, yeah, let's do an art auction. So I ended up doing an art auction with them and raising $9,000 to send. And this was it was so incredible, but honestly, I was
he was like, well, how am I going to send money? I'm a parent. I'm a new parent, and I'm self-employed, and I don't have a lot to offer. But I felt that I had to do something, and my time is valuable, and I wanted to give that. And so I worked with Massey Books to have an art auction, and then I started a GoFundMe, and I had help from funds for Gaza online on Instagram, and right now me and two other Jewish pals have started the Tzedakah Circle, so that we can continue to support Ala and Hanan and their families in Cairo, and also hopefully surpass that and extend to helping other families as well.
Wow, that sounds incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jasleen, how about you?
Yeah, my name is Bethany, and I initially, back in October, started starting to just see this misapplication of so-called equal human rights for everyone, but not really everyone, and trying to figure out what we can do sitting so far away and absorbing and bearing witness to all this pain and injustice out there. So when I reached out to David in November, I was fortunate enough to be then involved and then get connected with a couple of families in Gaza. And since then, I've been fortunate to continue being able to chat with them, check in with them, listen to their hopes and dreams, and, sometimes also even filling my own cup from their wisdom and perseverance and the love that they have for their homeland. And so what really struck me through all of those experiences since the last 10 months or so, being in conversation with a woman that's only 2 years older than me. She has 4 kids, her and her husband, and 4 kids got displaced multiple times internally in Gaza. And then earlier in this year, they were able to take out a massive loan that they're still trying to pay back, and then be now displaced into Cairo, where they're trying to essentially learn how to live a life from ground zero again. There's another gentleman out of Gaza, a farmer, and all he wants to do is just grow plants and be a farmer and live his life and care for plants. But here he is amidst all of this bombing, this incessant losing of family members, of best friends, seeing people that he's grown up with, these murdered ruthlessly in this Israeli genocide that's being perpetrated. So then it's sort of, you listen to them and you realize that they're just people like us, and they just were born in a different country, and as a result are now subject to this complete sort of deterioration of human rights and respect for their life. And so what being involved with David and with the rest of the folks in the Connecting Gaza initiative has given me is this ability to be grounded, to realize that at the end of the day, all our efforts, be it any political conversations we're having with our local representatives, any fundraising that we're doing for Gazans, at the end of the day, these are like very tangible human lives at the other end, just like you and I. And when I think about what people can do, I look towards folks like Aaron and like David, and I still continue to learn so much just seeing their activism and their ability to mobilize communities to come together and help out these folks that are just our global neighbors. And this effort can, it doesn't have to, we don't all have to, or maybe we don't necessarily all have the bandwidth to be continually engaged and to be continually supporting people so far away, but change begins at home is something that I really strongly believe in. And I think what people can do is, if you can't donate money, look around you. There are conversations and rhetorics in our societies that have led us to this day, that have led us to this whole year of an active genocide being live streamed on our phones, and us essentially not being able to do anything. And for our leaders to essentially run rogue and direct all of our funding and all of our taxes into essentially an apartheid genocidal state that does whatever it wants. And that didn't happen accidentally. So I think what people can do at the very least is not be silent anymore. Talk to your friends, talk to your relatives. When you see incorrect interpretations and these very dehumanizing assessments of what's happening way out there in the Middle East, don't other people like you and I. So challenge your family and friends and loved ones to a higher order of thinking. Challenge them to think about themselves as part of a bigger community than just themselves. And I think if we were to start moving in that direction, there is hope at the end of the tunnel for all of us. Otherwise, we're really all doomed as well. Everything that's happening in Gaza, that's just a few more steps away from us as well. That's sort of, what I've sort of come to learn with being in conversation with all these Palestinian families and seeing them continue to persevere and continue to look forward to a better day tomorrow.
Wow. That's incredible to hear this. And I do have a final question for all three of you. But before that, once again, I want to highlight that we are talking about a GoFundMe currently. There was a goal of 125,000, of which 122.5 almost has been reached. So it's still short by like 3.5, 4,000. Encourage everyone to go visit gofundme.com/the letter F/help-Gaza-families-survive. And my last question for all three of you. What is one thing that you learned about yourself and about other people through your experience doing this kind of work?
That's a great question. Somebody else want to go first?
I can go real quick. This is definitely. So I grew up in a Sikh family, and for the longest time, for most of my adult life, I've been a practicing atheist. But being involved in this has really reminded me of the ethos of that religion, which is seeking equality of all humankind, selfless service for everybody else around us, and just seeking justice for everyone, and not being quiet when injustices are being let out to our friends and our neighbors and other folks in our lives. And so that's been something that's been a very surprising revelation to me, is to sort of take this long, twisted, and very painful journey back into the roots of the sort of morals and ethics that I was raised with.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. For me, I think it's really learning and acknowledging my own privileges in the society, and acknowledging my power, and using it to do good in the world, and to see all people as worthy of life. That sounds so simple, but I think knowing my own privilege and using it and advocating, for the best I possibly can is something that I've learned over the last year, for sure. And, I think you said it. I think you said it better than I could have.
David.
Well, something I've learned about myself is actually I can do this. I've been doing this most of the time for about the last year. What I mean is virtually every day, I think most of my waking hours are devoted to this. I find it very fulfilling, actually in great contrast to all the political work and all the organizing. I'm not bragging or talking about myself, but back in October, you might know that I was arrested in the U.S. Capitol along with 500 other Jews. That had virtually no impact. I've spoken with ministers in the Canadian government. That has no impact. I've organized petition campaigns. That has no impact. I've spoken at rallies in Mississauga with 10,000 people waving Palestinian flags. When I say that has no impact, what I really have to say is we haven't seen the impact of that yet. I don't know when the balance gets tipped. I don't know when what we do is going to change what the Trudeau government's doing or get rid of the Trudeau government. But we haven't seen the outcomes yet. But I know if I raise $100 or $200 and send that to a 27-year-old woman in Gaza whose husband was killed, her father was killed, and she has 3 little kids that she has to feed every day, and I send her $200. She can buy food, right? There's an outcome. I did something that mattered, you know? So you asked, what did I learn about myself? And one thing I've learned about myself is that I can sustain my own efforts when I see outcomes. I don't feel burnt out. I don't feel like I'm doing something hopeless. I feel very energized. You might hear it in my voice, you know. So there are a lot of us doing this, and I think we all feel like what we're doing makes a difference, and it's very rewarding. And the personal relationships with people there, like Erin said so beautifully, how she's supported Allah and Ola and Hanan, and this is very meaningful and very rewarding, and it keeps me going, and I actually want to share it with other people, partly so they can experience it, but most primarily because it does help these families that are in such extreme deprivation and precarity. I feel like we all have like a moral obligation to just help them as much as we can. So that's what I get out of it. It's like, yeah, I can do this, even though I never did anything like this before. It never was necessary before. It never came up before. But there it is. It's right in our face. And we can do something. So that's it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's awesome that this is the case, and it's really very, very simple, isn't it? And especially these days when we know that these funds are getting there, and people who actually want to do something, and I mean, of course, people are already actually doing something. I don't mean it in that way, but if people feel like it, it's really, really simple. There are a lot of people getting together. There are a lot of individual GoFundMe pages of families. There are collective pages, etc. And what you guys have outlined for us is really eye-opening for, I think, a lot of our listeners who may want to engage directly. So we want to thank you once again for taking this time out and for your consistent efforts throughout this process. And we'd like to check in with you as we go down the road sometime.
Beautiful.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we were speaking with Erin, Jasleen, and David, and we are going to be coming back shortly. We are still broadcasting on CFRO 100.5 FM. We are also called Vancouver Co-op Radio. You can check us out there at www.coopradio.org. All right, so to round out our program for this evening, we are going to be getting in touch with Nasser Najjar, who is a local Palestinian from Gaza. And we've had him on the program before a few months ago, speaking to us about his analysis and experiences. And we're going to be doing this one more time. So stay with us. And, you know, we're non-commercial, but we're looking for sponsorship. So it's really easy. You know how that works, don't you? www.coopradio.org. You will never hear commercials, but you will hear really interesting programming, like the one that's going to be coming up next after this. I think it's all about girls and music and having a gender thing, whatever, and other shows. And I don't mean whatever like that. I just mean that's just the way it is. Yeah, hang on. Like a good time to get on air. Okay, here we are back on air. As we said, Nasser Najjar is joining us. Nasser is a local person who lives here in Vancouver, is also from Palestine, from Gaza, has family, friends, relations over there, has done a lot of work with the Red Cross, with a variety of international media, and like I said, has been here in Vancouver, sustaining his family, sustaining himself, and sustaining everybody else that he can, doing his best out there. It's been a year. Nasser, we spoke a long, long time ago, and it's been a year already. And I don't know, I just want to start there, Nasser, and give you an opportunity to share with us.
Thank you, Noor, and thank you for having me, especially on this day. The Truth and Reconciliation Day. It's important to bring up that the same colonial mind that hurt the natives over here is trying to do the same to my people back there. It's been a year, yes. I can't believe that this year went through, with all the photos that we've seen, with all the images that we scrolled on our small phones, with all the atrocities and war crimes that we had to witness day by day, with all the names of my friends who passed away, Ali, Muhammad Khurshid, Abdul Majid, Khalid Abu Kwik, all of those wonderful people who were part of my life. They were my co-workers, they were my friends, they were people who I grew up with. They do not live in this world anymore because of the genocide that Israel is going on and keeping on, not only in Gaza and the West Bank, and now they're starting it in Lebanon. It's been a year where we noticed that the world order and the UN institutions and all the international institutions are screaming and yelling and trying to understand how, and trying to push for humanity to find a place. But no, Israel can do whatever it wants. It has full impunity for 75 years. Why wouldn't it have it for this year?
It's absolutely unimaginable for me and possibly for others that aren't facing this reality day to day, are not losing loved ones and at such rates day to day. It is really, really difficult to imagine what your life is like, Nasser, out here in Vancouver. You've been here, 6 years or so on, I'm guessing, if I remember correctly. You had established yourself, were working here, and here you are. To say that you're resilient is kind of like a buzzword. I don't know what the right word is. Maybe you don't either. But what gets you through? I mean, how are you and others who are Palestinian are able to? I mean, what do you talk about with your friends when you meet them here, perhaps, or how do you get through this? It's an unfair question, and I know, but I'm just really curious.
While we're holding this interview, I'm walking my son, my 14 years months, Daniel. If he wasn't in my life, maybe I wouldn't make it. He's the only joy of my life nowadays. He was born 3 months before the genocide started, and maybe you can hear him right now. Heard his name, and it happens that as for me as a person, I have two divided lives. One where I have to go and work and pay my bills and pay my rent and act like everything is going normal and deal with my neighbors in a nice way, and deal with with strangers in a nice way who doesn't know all the details of my life. And then there's the other part of me, which is, of course, sad and disappointed in the world. But then I cannot cocoon. I cannot not keep on going on and fighting. I cannot. It's not an option, because it's not about me as Nasser. There are a lot of people who are depending on me. There is my family is directly depending on me, who I've been supporting for the last 10, 12 months, right now, 12 months for now. And there is my cousins who are also depending on me personally. There is my community, and there's, the people of Gaza. They depend on people like me in the diaspora to speak and to raise awareness and to share their pains and to share their stories. To tell people that, they were born under occupation. They were born in a cage where they were deprived from their human rights. And once you are deprived from your human rights, you have two options. Either that you just accept that you are quote-unquote slave, or you just fight back. Those are the two options that you have. Because we in Palestine, we're under Israeli occupation for 75 years. Israel do issue all of our IDs. Our IDs are written in Hebrew. We pay taxes to the Israeli government. We move according to their approvals. If they do not approve us with permits and travel documents, we won't be able to move or trade. Our trade and our goods are all subjected to their approval. If they do not approve certain types of goods, we will never have it. So at the very end, if anything, that is a type of slavery. And we have to bring up this to the world because we're in the 21st century. This type of behavior is not accepted. And I guess it's about time for the world to understand it. If there's no representation, if there's no human rights, we have to speak up, and we have to rise up, and we have to bring up the Palestinian statehood.
Mm-hmm. That makes complete sense. Nasser, because we have about 5 minutes left, I do want to ask a quick question, which is the situation in Gaza has sort of expanded now. I don't want to compare Gaza with Lebanon, but Lebanon is this new thing that's happening. So maybe you want to talk about that a little bit and we'll bring this conversation to a close.
Lebanon is a different story in a way that Lebanon is a state. And the involvement of Hezbollah. It was to support the Palestinian resistance on the ground, and that's what led to what Lebanon is in right now. Because that group in particular, and Lebanese in general, just like all the Arab world, they do not accept for what Israel is doing there. Unfortunately, Israel can go through with whatever atrocities they want to do because they're backed by the U.S., of course. It will, unfortunately, I'm worried and I'm scared for them. As we are speaking, the ground invasion just started. But if history teaches something, not ever a superpower won a resistance group. Not in Vietnam, not in Afghanistan, not in Iraq, and most probably not in Lebanon.
That is very true. And just as a last question, because we have about a couple of minutes left, and I do want to say thank you so much for sharing these inputs with us so far and for everybody listening. But what is, if we were to theoretically look at this as a cage, a way out of this cage for us? When I say us, I mean everybody as human beings.
Exactly. A way out of the cage is for Netanyahu to leave this government, and the Israelis to accept the UN resolutions 181, 242, and do accept their obligations toward the Oslo Agreement. All of this was under the supervision of the United States. In the occupation, the violence will end. It's simple as that. As long as the occupation remains, it's just a natural reaction for resistance to show up. Even you know what? If the resistance didn't succeed this time, and the Israelis somehow, which I doubt it, managed to eliminate Hamas and Hezbollah, more welcome. You just made 17,000 children orphans. Imagine how they're going to feel for the rest of their lives.
Nasser, we're going to have to end it there for time's sake. Once again, we really do appreciate you taking this time out and sharing with us. And, we'll catch up with you as we go down the road. We also want to speak with you about some of the other things that you are doing while you are here in Canada and while you are working towards these issues. There's many other things you are doing in the community. We wanted to speak with that as well.
Absolutely. One of the last things that I would say, I'm publishing a book, and hopefully a few weeks from now, it's going to be called Daughters of Light. It will represent war and love in Palestinian territories in Israel.
That's awesome, Nasser. We really look forward to talking with you about that once we get it in our hands. But even before, we can certainly start talking about that. And so, thank you, Nasser. Once again, enjoy the rest of the evening. The sun is going down really, really quick, so please take care. And once again, best of luck. We join you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye. And so for those of you who are listening, you might have heard a new voice, and this is Sharjul Yunus, who is joining us today. We thank him very, very much for his time, for his research, for his questions. And for you, the listener, www.coopradio.org. Just give us your money. Watch the rest, it's like listen to the rest of the shows that are programs that are coming up. And some of them are archived. You can also go there. And good luck. We thank you. Enjoy your evening. Until such a time as we meet again. Blade Raga. It's by the Asian Dub Foundation. I think we're finished. This is me. Until the next time. And a broken bicycle falling down a hill.